Welcome back to Nerf Diagnostic Repair, the show where I demonstrate diagnostic and repair techniques on broken blasters that people have sent me to repair. I'm your host, Captain Xavier. If you're interested in getting your blaster repaired, email me using my commission email address that's down in the description, and we can discuss about whether or not it's something I think I even can repair, and then all of the details there. So, we're going to go over a couple. Most of them are blasters that somebody took apart and then couldn't figure out how to get back together. So, I'm going to demonstrate reassembly techniques. I've done some videos on those before, but we're going to do some specific ones, starting with this Falcon Fire that was sent to me from a really long way away, and they would have just replaced it, but they had done this really slick paint job on it and didn't want to just replace it, and even if they replaced it, they still wouldn't have known how to put it back together. So, we're going to take a look and see if I can get this thing properly reassembled. Hopefully he hasn't gummed up too much of the internals with paint. That would be problematic. Alright. We seem to have lost a spring. That's probably a couple of springs, actually. And I don't see them in the bin, so that might be your problem right there. You also definitely don't have this quite aligned properly. There we go. So the general rule for painting, at least you didn't lose that spring. That would have been a catastrophic loss. Alright, we need to come up with 2 springs that are part of the trigger lock mechanism. I should be able to come up with springs that'll work from my spring bin. Let's find out. Maybe, maybe not. We're looking for some really small springs here. Alright, so lesson 1, keep track of your springs. Springs like to go sproing, so when you take a blaster apart, it's best to do it somewhere where if a spring goes flying, you'll be able to find it, which is rarely the case for us modders, as we tend to be in messy workshops, like the one I'm in now. Now it should just be a matter of getting it all in here and properly aligned. Another important thing to remember when painting is try to never paint moving parts. Because any part that's got to move needs to slide in the manner it was intended to slide. And when you paint it, you add a layer that may interfere with the required movement of said part. Vinyl dye is not as bad because it tends to soak in, but it still does add some material. I think I've got everything aligned properly. I'm going to put in just enough screws to test the operation and to make sure. So it is a little sticky because of the paint, but repeated use will wear that down. Make sure you're putting the screws back in the right places. Some places need longer screws, some places need shorter screws. It's generally fairly easy to tell in a lot of cases, just based on, obviously, the length of this section. You're not going to get a full-length screw in there. It would go right out the back, and you don't want that. Try to keep track of which ones went where when you take it apart. Otherwise, you're pretty much just going to have to work it out. If you try putting a screw in and it goes in until it bottoms out and you can't get it to go in any further and the shell is still loose, then obviously that is not where that particular screw went. It was missing a couple of screws. Luckily, I have a bin of screws to draw from. Alright, hypothetically it should work. The slide is sticky, like I said, as a result of the paint job, but it should still work. Let's find a dart and test it. It lives! So the takeaway is, try not to lose your springs when you take your blaster apart. Make sure things are getting realigned, and try not to print parts that move too much. This does now work. It's snappy, because I think the spring that I put in is a little bit heavier than the original. So you got to make sure it goes all the way forward and then snaps. And then it fires beautifully. I understand why he didn't want to replace it. That is a really nice paint job, actually. I really like the copper accents as well as the blue that's on there. Really would recommend having, you know, some orange on the tip there. But depending on where you are, it may not be required, or if you're using it for, you know, a private property LARP, it might actually be discouraged for reasons of, you know, immersion and all that. But yeah, try to keep your springs, and then reassembling, it's really just a matter of making sure, especially with this blaster, because it's got a lot of parts that slide, and he had some of them slightly misaligned. That's just a matter of making sure everything lines up properly. So there you have a reassembled and fixed Falcon Fire that will be headed back to the other side of the planet, hopefully tomorrow. Also, I highly recommend anytime a blaster dies completely or you do an integration, keep the screws and springs. You never know when they'll come in handy. All right. Up next, we have whatever's in this box. Yes. A Sharpfire? I believe this is a Sharpfire. Same issue, got it apart, couldn't figure out how to put it back together. So, let's reassemble a Sharpfire. Hopefully, he sent me all of the parts. So I had this part in upside down, so that probably wasn't helping. That's the trigger safety, so you can't fire it until it's fully primed. There are parts here, I don't know what they're for. That looks broken. That is. That part is physically broken. Well, I can't fix that. There appears to be parts from at least 2 Sharpfires in here. Almost positive that does not belong in this blaster at all. Short a couple of screws, but again, they are standard screws. We are again missing a couple of screws, but they are standard screws, so I will be able to replace them. Alright, it may work. Let's put a dart through it. Hooray! It lives! Alright, so the takeaway here is the same as the takeaway with the Falcon Fire, and that is, go slow. When you take a blaster apart for the first time, pay very close attention to where everything came out. Where all the screws came out. If you bought the blaster new and you have the instructions, it has a picture of the blaster. You can stick the screws in the instructions where the screws came out. It makes it really easy to remember which ones went where. And then the same thing with the internals. Before you pull out any of the internals, and be very careful when you open it up in case springs go springing, take a picture of it even. Pretty much everyone has a camera phone these days, or at least access to a camera. Take a picture of it, or even a short video of it, showing where all of the parts are, and then move the parts and see how they interact. How, what does this part do? It locks the trigger when the the slide is partially back. Okay, well, that tells you which way things need to be. The springs need to be set so that it forces this thing in this direction until this happens. And keep track of all of that. Also, keep track of your parts. Because this isn't even from... I'm pretty sure this is from a recon barrel. I don't know what this bent pin is from. This is from a Sharpfire, but there's only the one of them. And then this one was a broken one from one of these. It was the Dark Tooth that got broken off. So it's a good thing you sent spares, because if this had been broken, there's no way I could have fixed this. So there you have it. This one will be going back. I'm not sure who it's going back to. So if you see this video where I fixed your Sharpfire, email me with your address so I can make sure it gets back to the right person. Next. Up next, we have another reassembly. This time, a Helios. So they got it apart, couldn't figure out how it went back together, and we're going to try to reassemble it. Hopefully I can. I've only disassembled one of these. Well, that pin is definitely not supposed to be bent. Okay, so the parts that they did not have back in were the actual release and the link from the trigger to the release. And I can't seem to get the trigger housing open. There is also at least one part in here that is bent. That should not be. So we are going to have to try to bend that back. This is all stuff I didn't mess with when I opened mine, because you don't need to. So why would you? He asks knowingly. Maybe it is supposed... I can't... It can't be supposed to be bent. They also have an A-wall catch spring, which turns out, for your blaster to work properly, that's kind of necessary. I know this actually in frame. Okay, so the parts that they had that weren't in place anymore, there was a catch spring was missing, as well as the tab that actually acts as the release and the link that runs from it to your trigger group. Now we just need to figure out how everything else goes on here. All right. Rattling. Safety works. That works. Cool! Alright. Well, again, takeaway here is pay attention to how things went together in the first place. Take pictures. And again, work out what the parts do. Don't just know where they go, but know what their function is. So that bar that goes from the back, that was what linked the trigger to the actual lever that did the releasing. Knowing that those parts go in those places doesn't necessarily help if you don't know how they're supposed to function, because sometimes tension springs could be upside down, or parts could be more than one direction, and it only works if you know which way they're supposed to go. So In this case, it was fairly straightforward once you knew how it went. Also, when you knew how to take that trigger group apart. That was something that I hadn't done with mine because you didn't need to upgrade the spring. The whole trigger, the grip, and the whole internal housing are all kind of one big block that can stay together, and you can still get the back end off and alter the spring and all of that. But if you want to get in and start mucking around with it, then you have to open it up and you have to know where everything goes. So, yeah, lovely. This will again go back to whoever it came from. I think I was given it at Ragnar Oktoberfest, so hopefully they know who they are and will contact me so that I can get it sent back to them. Alright, let's do one more. The final one that I'm going to do is this little number, which is a modified Firestrike, and I'm not entirely sure what exactly is wrong with it. It fires, I assume it has something to do with whatever on earth all of this is. Supposedly there's something wrong with the wiring. We're going to pop it open and just take a look at that wiring and see if a broken joint jumps out at us or something like that. Okay, well, there are two red wires that are probably supposed to be going somewhere that currently don't. Pretty sure I can tell where one of them was supposed to go. Not so sure about the other. You definitely need a better housing for this, because this is just going to break again if you don't secure these wires so that they're not just dangling. Okay, well, after much experimentation and tweaking and testing and looking at labels and stuff, I did finally figure out where all of the wires were supposed to go. A possible takeaway from this is if you want someone to do your soldering, show them a wiring diagram. So apparently when you flip the switch, the light blinks and then stops blinking. And then blinks differently. No idea. But it works now. So I'm going to button it up. You definitely are going to want to secure that because those wires wobbling around, they're just going to break again. So I don't know, glue it, tape it. Something other than it just sitting out like that. No idea what it is, what it's from, what it's for, but that's how you solder it. So there is another takeaway. Anytime you're messing with any kind of a circuit board, make sure you know where all the wires go so you can reconnect them. In this case, I was finally able to note that there was a B- and a B+, so battery negative, battery positive. And on the other side, there was an L-, L+, so LED, positive and negative. And when I hooked it up that way, then it started, in fact, working. It does whatever it's supposed to be doing as far as I can tell. But like I said, you're going to want to secure that or those wires are going to break because they're really loose. Also, having your circuit board outside is bad. That's bad. So, I would recommend moving the circuit board inside and just having it permanently on, and then having an external switch that you mount somewhere, heck, maybe even there, that then connects, that breaks the circuit. That way you have an external switch and this is internal. But it is fixed as far as you requested, so whoever sent me this, email me. Let me know, because I have no idea where this is supposed to go. Alright, That's it for diagnostic and repair today. We've got a little bit on soldering, a little bit, and mostly how to reassemble stuff. Go slow. There is no need to be in a huge hurry when you do your modding. Take it apart slowly, pay attention where everything is so that you know where it goes back. Document if necessary. Take lots of pictures so that you can just go back through and look at them all and figure out where things are supposed to go. Take your time. It's easier to go slow and do it right the first time than to have to go back and redo it. And sometimes have to replace parts. Sometimes expensive parts. Sometimes entire blasters. So there is my advice for this one. I hope this was helpful. Thank you guys for watching.